Good afternoon and welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series. I'm Eric Auskerson, one of the hosts for today. We've got a fantastic program for you, lots going on. We've been conducting these over the past 2 months. We greatly appreciate being with you. We always learn a lot through your questions, and I'm going to get right into it because we have so much to cover. But first, let me just cover a couple of housekeeping items. I think most of you are becoming rather familiar with our webinar platform. You have this toolbar at the bottom. This is where you can get your CPE certificate, but don't worry. If you do not receive it during today's session, you will receive an email about it. If you're watching the archive version, you cannot earn CPE. I also want to bring to your attention that we have a number of materials available for you. So please click on that materials button. You've got today's presentation. You've got information about the recently passed PPP flexibility legislation, and you've got a list of the frequently asked questions. Take a quick look at that frequently asked PPP question document because it may answer some of the questions that you have coming into today's session. So what are we going to be covering? We're going to first just talk broadly about where things stand. Then we're going to do a review of the PPP Flexibility Act that was passed last night by the Senate. We'll talk about what we know related to upcoming SBA and Treasury guidance. There's going to be more coming, so we'll be discussing that. We'll give you the latest on the forgiveness calculator. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some restart issues. We're going to talk about returning to work and risk considerations, and we've got an expert with us today to help guide that discussion. And then we'll close with an open forum session. So with me today are Mark Koziel, who leads the firm services area for the AICPA, and you all, I think, know him rather well. We've got our partner Aon with us, Stan Sterna, who's a vice president there, and he's going to be talking about some of the restart issues and also will be participating in our open forum. Elisa Simpson is the Director of Firm Services, and her team have been working tirelessly putting together all of the resources that you've been leveraging for the PPP program. And then Mark Peterson leads the advocacy area for the AICPA, and his team has probably never been busier with all that's going on in Washington, D.C. And once again, I'm Eric Auskerson. I'm the President and CEO of CPA.com, the AICPA's business and technology subsidiary, and we've been very, very actively engaged with firms with all that's going on as well. So let me just first talk a little bit about what's been going on with the stakeholders. And I'm just going to step back a little bit and, reflect on, the passing of the CARES Act and what happened during the first week in April, because what just occurred with the Senate, we've really been focused on for the past 6 or 7 weeks. Immediately after the passing of the CARES Act, everyone realized due to the massive shutdown of small businesses that we needed more flexibility in this program. So we've been advocating for it. We've been talking to Treasury and SBA and policymakers related to adding some additional flexibility elements. And we are thrilled that the Senate passed it last night, and we're gonna get into it. With that said, we know there's some frustrations out there that many businesses would have liked this to have happened sooner. We understand that, but there's some positives that we're going to be discussing related to businesses that have been utilizing the PPP funds, per the act as it was passed on March 27th. So we'll get into greater details there. We've also been very active with the Payroll Coalition in talking about the forgiveness process. We're going to discuss, where we see some of that going. There's discussions around further simplification related to forgiveness, so we'll give you the latest on that. And we're also going to talk about some of our discussions with the lenders in the banking community. When we look at the major phases now, one thing that has changed on this slide is that the forgiveness period is now May through December. So we've got a 24-week covered period. So that is going to take us till the end of December. for some of the applications. So this is going to make it a much longer period. One big down arrow here is that you're going to have time. You're going to have lots of time to fill out that forgiveness application, so we'll be talking about that. And we are going to begin the discussion today on some of the restart considerations that you need to be discussing with your clients. So let's just take a quick look at the latest PPP numbers. These numbers have basically been flat for the past couple of weeks. We had a slight increase in the total PPP loans. We now have 4.5 million businesses that have received a loan, and the total loan amount has stayed flat at $510 billion. That's what it was last week, and even the previous week it was around that level. The reason for that is because there were some double applicants, and there's been a small number of businesses that have returned their funds, but it's been mainly driven by some adjustments in accounting there at SBA, as well as just a slowdown in new applicants. We do think with this flexibility, PPP Flexibility Act, there's going to be an increase in applications, and we think this is probably one of the top focuses for the firms over the next couple of weeks. So what's been highlighted in the press over the past week is what we're going to be talking about today. There was a lot of focus related to the Senate and how they were advancing the House bill. And I'm going to pass this off to Mark Peterson, and he's going to share with you how this, finally got finalized and where he sees things going. So, Mark?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eric. So, yes, as Eric pointed out and everybody knows, the Senate did pass last night by unanimous consent a package of relief that had been passed by the House of Representatives last week. And we're going to get into the details as we move through our presentation. It passed, the House package passed by 417-1, which really put a lot of pressure on the Senate to act. They had originally kind of coalesced around a package that was slightly different, related to the payroll percentages that were required and potential different lengths, whether it be 24 weeks or 16 weeks. But because of the overwhelming House vote, there was a lot of pressure to move quickly, and so they did. Unanimous consent last night. Some concern related to the ratio of the House bill related to payroll moving from 75% to 60%, but that 60%, some technical challenges related to it being a cliff, which again we're going to get into a little bit as we move forward. The other thing, next slide, is that they accompanied with this, and this is an indication, this does not happen often, this was an indication that they wanted to move quickly, and because if they had to, it would have slowed down the process if they actually amended the House package. What they did is they accompanied the House-passed bill that will be headed to the President here shortly with some congressional intent in writing, signed by managers of the bill, to really fill in the gaps that were not outlined in statute. And they were very much focused on when will this program end. And so there was some ambiguity in the statute about the actual time at which loans will cease being made. And as you can see from the slide here, it is June 30th. And so this was to accompany the legislation that moved forward. When is it going to be signed into law? We think it's imminent. It could be as quick as this evening, or President Trump could sign it tomorrow. It would be hard for me to believe that it will leak past tomorrow just because of the pressure on so many businesses related to when they started their 8 weeks. So we think that can happen at any point in time. The only other issue that I will add before I turn it over to Mark is to just mention some discussion that you're probably reading about in the press, and it relates to a lot of appeals to Treasury to create a threshold for smaller businesses that took PPP loans. So there are a lot of congressional letters going to SBA and to Treasury in order to create a threshold or a de minimis at which there would be fewer requirements in order to get the refund. They're all over the place. Some are at $350 $1,000 for a loan, $250, $200, $150, $100. There's multiple recommendations that are coming in, both being generated by the grassroots in the states to Capitol Hill, and then from Capitol Hill to Treasury and the SBA. We believe that it would require legislation to actually do that, which means that we're looking into probably later this summer if anything like that was to happen. There is some that believe that the Treasury could do it regulatorily. Again, under these circumstances, you could almost argue anything's possible. We believe it would probably require statute. So that's something that you're going to hear and read about. I would not focus on it yet because it's still very uncertain whether there would ever even be a de minimis threshold, and if there is one, where it would be set.
Hey, Mark, a question here. As we know, with the PPP Flexibility Act, that Treasury is going to have to, reissue an updated forgiveness application. There's going to be lots of FAQs and guidance coming out, and we've had some discussions with Treasury and SBA. We know wherever they can improve the process with this kind of quote-unquote reset, they're going to do this. So one, there's this effort in Congress to potentially have an easy forgiveness application. Some people have been using that phrase, an easy application. But Treasury is still, with this reset, going to try to improve it, and we've been providing them feedback. So there might be some improvements that we see based on some FAQs that come out, and then the new form, the updated forms, I should say, and then you've got this longer period effort that's in Congress. And as you also said, that and I said, this is not something that firms have to understand tomorrow, because now we have time, right, the forgiveness process. But just maybe a couple of comments on those multiple things that are occurring at the same time. Treasury trying to improve things with this reset, and then the activities in Congress.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Eric. I mean, Treasury, every conversation we've had with them and every conversation that Treasury's had with Congress has been about, streamlining the process. They are constrained by statute. Sometimes that is, it's very specific. Sometimes there's, differences in interpretation. But, within their flexibility under statute, they're very interested, and they've expressed that, and they've made outreach to us as to how can they make things more simple and streamlined. So we do think at this, as Eric mentioned, reset period, because they're going to have to reflect on what passed last night, we do think they're going to take that as an opportunity within the powers they have in regulation in order to make it as simple as they believe that they can. And so, again, I do think that is going to be an opportunity, as the dust settles, as they reflect on, the new bill. And then there will be, again, I think at some point an opportunity, depending on what the issue is, for some statutory changes. But, based on some information I'll give you here shortly, I think that's probably later this summer.
Okay, so with that, let's bring up the Mark Koziel. And Mark, tell us, the highlights, the big impacts here of this new Flexibility Act.
Thanks, Eric. And yeah, I mean, this is what we've been asking for, as Eric had mentioned before. There's a lot of changes that have taken place. First and foremost is extending the 8-week period to 24 weeks. Now, keep in mind, this is an option to extend from 8-week period to 24 weeks. And Eric had mentioned, there's some of your clients who may have been very early in this process. They could be 6+ weeks into the forgiveness, the covered period, and at the end of 8 weeks, they may actually qualify for the 75%. Their FTEs are full, they haven't dropped any salaries, and it may be to their advantage to do that. Now, that does not mean that tomorrow or the entire weekend we have to hurry up and get a forgiveness application done, because the application is going to change anyway, right? So, based on all that, there's still not a lot we can do with this. And you have up to 10 months from the date of the end of your coverage period to actually submit the forgiveness application. So there is still a lot of time. I see a lot of questions that are coming in related to the 24 weeks and how do we apply that. And we just aren't going to know. We're going to give you every bit of information we can today. We're going to keep it up to date. We are close. As FAQs come out, we will be able to get that information to you. You know, we said 2 weeks ago, I think it was, Eric, that, you know, Treasury was going to be dropping FAQs. We heard that rumor. We knew it was coming, but then this Flexibility Act started to be discussed, and then Treasury just kind of pulled back. There was no sense for them to drop those FAQs, only to have all of that change based on what this Flexibility Act does. So 24-week period, 75% requirement is reduced to 60%. But you have to remember now, the 75% was a calculation that was the minimum that you had to have in payroll over the 8-week period. Now in a 24-week period, they're saying you better have at least 60% in payroll, otherwise you're not going to be forgiven at all. It's a cliff. So 75% is they will fund and forgive, with 75% of the forgiveness being payroll, whatever that number turns out to be. Now that they're saying 60% over 24 weeks, they're saying if you don't hit 60% in payroll, they're not forgiving anything. But still, it's 1% over 5 years. We'll get into all that too. It's still not a big number.
And Mark, as you said, though, you got 24 weeks now, so that's, and there's talk that they might do something in Congress with that cliff, but there's a lot of senators who are very supportive of making sure there was that payroll requirement, but the 24 weeks should really help out.
I would think. I mean, it would be really hard not to hit the payroll if we only had 2.5 months as our calculator up front on the loan. One thing I want to remind everyone too, that this Flexibility Act that they're talking about, and you know, I may not have this right. I'll let Lisa correct me if not, but the Flexibility Act only applies to Section 1106, the forgiveness piece of the application, right? So the CARES Act, the PPP is actually split in two. Section 1102 is the loan. Section 1106 is the forgiveness. So it's not like they're now saying all loan amounts are being increased from 8 weeks to 24. It's just that whatever that loan amount was that we calculated, we now have 24 weeks to actually prove it and get that into forgiveness. So I think that's an important aspect to understand. FTE Safe Harbor was rolled back from June 30th to December 31. It's important to note that that's only for the FTE reduction on the Safe Harbor, not for the 25% drop in wages or any of the other forgiveness calculations that have to be. But that also gives you a ton of time. It means that you're not going to be completing an application for forgiveness most likely until next year. And keep in mind, your clients may be asking for it sometime during tax season of 2021. So we may have some planning issues around our scheduling for that. New exceptions for the FTE reduction: if you couldn't rehire employees, then there's an exception rule for that. If you couldn't find qualified employees. And the interesting one, and we've been saying this all along, this was part of our recommendation, so it was good to see in there, to understand those that had operating restrictions that didn't even allow them to bring employees back, that they could earn wages to do what it is that they needed to do. So if there's a proof of that, and that is a contributor to the FTE reduction, then you can prove that and have that as part of it. If we go to the next slide. New loan maturity of 5 years, and that's what I said again. If you don't hit the 60%, now all of a sudden it's 100% loan and you didn't get anything forgiven, now you're looking at 1% over 5 years. Should be fairly easy for a lot of businesses to repay that better than the 2 years that was there. Loan payments are deferred until SBA determines the amount of forgiveness, and so it was a 6-month deferral before that. 2-year deferral of employer share of payroll taxes. So this is a big item that you could only take the deferral of payroll taxes until you got to the PPP. So you couldn't take the PPP covered period and the deferral of taxes together. Now they're saying that you are able to. The one thing that's missing from this, and we've talked about this a lot, is the deductibility of the PPP expenses that we applied for forgiveness on Still not deductible. That wasn't covered in this Flexibility Act. But again, we have a lot of time. We have till the end of the year for them to fix that. We do anticipate at least discussion around it, but would also be potentially positive, and we will continue to advocate for the deductibility of those expenses. We go to the next slide.
Yeah, Mark, just on this, though, just one thing, when you really look at the Flexibility Act here, what this has done is really driven the intent of the PPP program to be a grant. I mean, if the businesses now really are in a position, even if they were shut down, even if they have issues in bringing some of their employees back, with this additional 24 weeks and all of these other flexibility elements, working with their firm, they should be able to get, in most cases, forgiveness. So this hopefully will be well received.
For sure. Thanks. All right, new guidance, additional FAQs and IFRs. Guess what? We don't have any yet. We're working on it. I know Treasury has plans to do it, but as I mentioned before, it just wouldn't have made sense to drop those in the last 2 weeks, knowing that this was going to take place. You know, this bill, this now legislation almost signed, really, they did it with a lot of things going against them. And, you know, you had recess in there, you had social distancing, and so it became more challenging to do it. They got it done in 3 weeks, which in DC term, that is like lightning speed. But it still doesn't feel fast enough for many of us on a program that just continues to move so fast. Treasury is going to have FAQs. They will be updated based on this new 24-week and all the additional items that are going to be here. We had a lot of questions before this legislation was passed. You know, our questions were submitted. Your questions were submitted as part of that. We're comfortable that a lot of things will get answered once Treasury is able to update their FAQ documents to line up to what happened here. It's just not today. And when it does happen, even still, we're not in a great rush. So if your clients see that or tell them that we're waiting on that, we still have a lot of time, that we have to plan appropriately. This is not a hurry up and get the application in like the loan application was. We need to better understand it. And I see a lot of questions coming in the queue right now that we're just not going to be able to answer. Some may be in the FAQ, things like, can I include cell phone as part of utilities? Can I include garbage fees because it's on my sewer invoice? Can I include that as part of my utilities? And these are all, you know, great questions. But first, I have to say, moving to 24 weeks, I'm wondering if we're even going to have the need for that, based on the fact that payroll is going to get much easier to hit. And because the loan application, the loan amount hasn't changed, and we have now 24 weeks to expend, you know, 60 is the floor. If we end up spending 80 or 90% in payroll and the rest in the utilities, we should more than easily be able to cover what our loan application and the loan amount was based on this new 24-week period, and we shouldn't have to get so granular inside of some of the expenses to get it. So again, to Eric's point, it is like a grant now. It should be far easier for a lot of your clients to be able to hit it, and we are confident that there will be guidance. We're not sure quite when. We are going to keep a strong eye on this, and as soon as we can update our loan calculator and get the FAQs out to you, we absolutely will. Eric?
Hey, well said, Mark. We transition now to, you know, some of the key focuses that we think make sense for the firms. But as you just said, there's going to be up to 30 FAQs coming out. It may come out this Friday night. It may come out early next week. But we all will have time to digest it, get it 100% right, update the forgiveness calculators, and know how to, you know, appropriately fill out the forgiveness application. But what we're thinking about right now, related to you know, firms and their discussions with clients, Mark, this is something that we put together. So I'll let you clear it, and I might have a couple of additional comments.
Great. Yeah, I mean, based on the new Flexibility Act, you know, you should have all those clients who were sitting on the fence before should be fairly interested, knowing that the forgiveness just got a lot easier. to actually apply to get the loan. There's still $140 billion out there, as Eric had mentioned. Now's a great time to be talking to those clients or letting any of your clients who you know didn't get it, just, hey, heads up, things just got a little bit easier around this program and you may consider doing it. You know, there continues to be questions around agent fees and the lenders paying and what do I do? And we continue to be where we were on advice to our members at the very beginning of this program. And we said, look, part of figuring out what that loan possibility would be under PPP and looking at all the federal programs together, that is all part of advisory services. You should be able to get paid by your client to be able to do that. But you know what? Make sure you got an engagement letter in place to do that. And if you have ongoing services as a regular part of what you do, that should be included already. But we've always said that, you know, advisory services are definitely outside the scope of anything discussed inside the act around agent fees. And then when you talk about agent fees and the fact that the lender has to pay the agents, we've had some of our member firms who have gone to the banks to try and get paid. Some successful, a lot of them not successful. And in the instances where they've been successful, they've been able to hammer out an engagement letter up front. Again, having that engagement letter, having that conversation up front. But not all banks have been as willing to pay an agent fee or have an agent as part of the process. So understanding that as you go in with these additional clients for the $140 billion, getting that worked out up front may be in your best interest today. Eric?
Yeah, well said, Mark. And we're well aware of some of the issues with the lenders. It's something that we all need to focus on, building better relationships between the firms and the lenders. The last couple of weeks we've had practitioners on that have discussed that. As Mark said, some successes. The key thing here is, you know, the firm can provide all of the services via, you know, an advisory service engagement letter, as Mark just outlined. And you really do need to get that engagement letter set up with a lender around the agent fees. And we'll just continue to have those discussions, but the advice that we provided early on is still our current advice, and we'll just watch as that continues to evolve. And we do think with the lending community that there is, you know, an opportunity to work on the forgiveness process with them. We do know some firms that are entering into, you know, special services for the banks, providing some AUPs. We've talked about that before as well, on helping the banks with, you know, processing the forgiveness stage. So just let's all keep working on those relationships and doing it as best we can. But we're aware of some of the issues out there, and we'll continue to try to address them for you. So with this, I now want to transition over to Lisa, who's going to give you an update on our resources and an update on the calculator.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to take just a minute to address some of the questions that are coming in quickly. We're continuing to get questions about whether the compensation cap is going to change from $15,385. I'll just reiterate that we'll have to wait for additional guidance on that. A lot of great questions about if you met your full forgiveness before the 24 weeks, can you go ahead and apply and maybe beat some of those safe harbor dates? Again, we're just going to have to wait for some guidance on that. Another one came in about, does the lender have to change the maturity date for a loan if it was processed prior to the enactment of this Flexibility Act once the president signs it into law? It is up to the lender and the borrower to come to an agreement as to whether or not they'll extend the term up to 5 years, but the lender does not have to make that change. Also getting a lot of questions about self-employed forgiveness guidance. Again, once those FAQs come out, we hope that we'll have some more information for you, and we'll get that information out as quickly as we can. All right, so with that, let's talk about our resource page. I just wanted to highlight that it does have a new look, and we're updating it as quickly as we can based on the new act that just came out. We are working on a simplified payroll loan forgiveness calculator for a borrower with no employees. we had that pretty much ready to go, but with the act coming into play, we'll just hold on to that and see what additional guidance we can get out of there. On the next slide, we always love to refer to our loan forgiveness calculator. Thank you all for giving us your feedback and your suggestions. We will continue to get it updated, and you'll always see my friendly reminders there on how to make sure that you're using that calculator to the best of its extent. The formulas are protected so that we can make sure that it's in alignment with our understanding of the guidance. And but rest assured, we're working on that as quickly as we can.
And Lisa, what I'll just tell the audience is that you receive tremendous feedback, lots of feedback from many firms. So your team QAs it, and you've got firms QAing it. And I don't know what the download count is, but last time I saw, it was in the 30 to 40,000 range. I'm sure it's much higher now. So it's a resource that we're receiving a lot of positive feedback on. So I encourage everyone to leverage it, and also to realize that we are going to have to update this again now with the Flexibility Act. So another update will be coming.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Mark,
with
were you going to
we
take
have the
this one?
loan matrix here. Lisa, Mark, just anything you want to highlight based on the current discussions we're having with firms and how they're leveraging this?
I do. I'm not going to go deep into detail. This is available on our website. We've, no real updates to it. We've said all along on the forgiveness, depending on what type of service you typically do and what the client's looking for. I will say, Eric and Lisa, that there's been a lot of firms that we've been seeing talking to us about doing some level of a agreed upon procedure, an AUP, do kind of like a pre-audit. So to say, okay, if you were audited, client, by the SBA, whether it's a $2 million plus or below that, because interestingly, and you've seen in the press that Treasury and the SBA have said that those loans over $2 million are going to get some level of an audit. All we know today is that is at least on the certification around need and liquidity. That does not necessarily mean that every loan over $2 million is going to have its documentation reviewed on that submission. All loans are subject to a documentation review similar to an IRS audit on the tax side. So any one of your clients could be randomly selected to have their documentation reviewed. Firms are setting up services where they're doing these audits to make sure that the clients have the right amount of documentation to support their forgiveness amount. So that would fall under these AUPs going forward.
Thanks, Mark. So with that, what we want to turn to is Stan here, Cerna, who's going to give us some thoughts on returning to work considerations, both for the firm and for your clients. And we've been talking about, the critical time this is to play the trusted advisor role, both for your firm as well as your clients. And we think this is a discussion we're going to be having more of. But Stan, why don't you kick this off and give the audience about a 10-minute overview? And we've got some great slides here for you to leverage and think about this very important topic, which is going to become top of mind for everybody in the coming weeks. So with that, Stan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eric. We're doing the same thing at Aon here, the risk advising advisors. We're pivoting. We're dealing with all the stuff that everyone else is dealing with PPP and other things, but we're also pivoting to the return to work issue. We now have all 50 states in one phase of reopening or the other. So firms that have to start thinking about how best to bring back their employees to the office in a safe manner. And I know for many out there, that's a very daunting task. There's a myriad of complex issues that one has to deal with. There's obviously the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are constantly changing state, federal, and local laws and guidelines and regulations. And then you have the fact that firm offices employees are located in different states, cities, and counties. And the laws and rules that apply and the guidance applies is very granular in terms of returning to work, opening your workspace, and things of that nature. So What I'd like to do in the time that we have is just provide our participants with a basic overview of how to go about formulating a workplace safety plan and provide them with resources that are available so that you can welcome your employees back to the office in a health and safe manner. The first thing I suggest is that you kind of calibrate your way of thinking. Don't think of it as return to work planning. In my opinion, that's too short term. It assumes the planning is over as soon as you open your doors and invite your employees back into the office. Instead, you should think of it as workplace safety planning. It has a long-term connotation, and it instills a sense and a culture at the firm that the health and safety of the employees and the folks that are associated with the firm, whether it's clients and vendors, in a post-COVID-19 world will continue to be, that will be of paramount importance. Next, identify common obstacles that you should address before you implement a workplace safety program. Some common obstacles that often arise are firm leaders, employees, and clients are not aware of the plan and not buying into it. There's a lack of transparency in the communication with regard to the plan. Firms being reactive rather than proactive. Sort of easy to do because we're under a new norm and things are happening very fast, but you need to be proactive in looking up guidelines, updates, and taking action. You have the geographic difficulties by office and location, where clients are located, where the firm is located, where even employees are located. It can all impact the workplace safety program. And then you have client service issues, like balancing in-person contact with the health and safety and well-being of not only staff, but also the client. Next slide, please. So next, I'd like to talk about planning a plan. And, what exactly, does that mean, planning a plan? So what it really means is before you start thinking of what your plan is going to look like, you need to determine how you're going to develop that plan. Who is going to be involved? What resources are at your disposal that you can turn to for guidance? First, determine whose involvement is needed for the successful implementation of a workplace safety program or plan. You need to get senior management and all staff to buy in. They have to know what the plan is and that compliance is required. Leverage internal HR resources, your technological staff, and your inside or outside legal counsel. All three of them are going to be very important from the concept of protecting people and people issues with it, whether it's HR, potential privacy concerns with your technological staff and legal counsel, and then just risk liability management that you can discuss with your legal counsel or your risk advisor. Finally, you have to figure out who's going to manage the process, and I suggest that you have one individual or group of individuals that have control over the process, the implementation, and then registering or monitoring the compliance. It can be the CEO, it can be the managing partner, it can be the chief risk officer or the COO. But just make sure that it can be anyone, but just make sure that that person is someone with a holistic or enterprise knowledge of the firm risk management and its quality control procedures. Next, I always tell firms, know what you don't know. Determine where you're going to have to determine where and when you're going to have to turn to other sources to fill in expertise gaps with your personnel in formulating, implementing, and if necessary, subsequently adapting the plan. There's a lot of resources out there on a national, state, local, and even private level that you can go to serve as guides. As noted, we will provide a list of resources that you can turn to now in order to develop the workplace safety program. Next slide, please. So, how do you actually go about putting together a workplace safety program? I mean, that's the question I hear a lot from firms. I especially the smaller firms. I don't know where to go. I don't have the resources to pay for a consultant to come in. As I noted, there's many resources out there, but you need to execute a plan that fosters employee and client health and safety, but is also conducive to your business needs. That means not only getting the buy-in, like I said, from firm management and your staff, but your buy-in from the client as well, or the clients as well. And I think the experience so far has been that many clients understand that things are going to be different, and that maybe in-person contact won't be as frequent as it was before, or virtual meetings and Zoom calls are going to be maybe the new norm, rather than constantly meeting personally. So get their buy-in, get their understanding as to what the plan is. Next, make sure your plan is current and up to date, yet adaptable enough to respond to the ever-changing, not only pandemic, but federal, state, local laws and guidance. It's changing all the time, just like the PPP has evolved and changed over time since March 27th. The guidance that is being provided, whether it's through the federal government or state and local or even counties, is constantly evolving as the pandemic evolves, as different things change. You have to be adaptable. So you have to be able to review weekly updates and guidance and then adapt your plan accordingly. Next, good communication is essential. It's essential for any good business practice, but especially when you're implementing a new workplace safety program. I suggest you have a uniform cadence, whether that's weekly or even daily or monthly, whatever it is, just updating folks on what the plan is. And use multiple modes of communication, emails, texts, regular mails, webinars. It doesn't matter, as long as you're ensuring that all your employees and staff are receiving this information and they know what's going on, as well as providing that same information to your clients and your vendors about the new norm at the office in order to ensure safety. In the end, though, you need to choose a communication mode that works best for your firm and your firm's culture. You're also going to need to train. When you formulate a workplace safety plan, you're going to have to train your staff and everyone else as to what the program entails in the new normal. And you're going to have to modify that training possibly based upon the role of the employee. Obviously, managers might receive different training than essential and non-essential workers. Essential workers having to be in the office may receive different training, obviously, than other folks. And then finally, remember that your workplace safety plan has to benefit the firm as a whole. You have to think more on a holistic approach. It can't just benefit one individual or group of individuals. So the more that you can engage everybody's input and everybody's buy-in when formulating and planning the plan and implementing the plan, you're going to be that much better off. Next slide, please.
Yep, we're there, Stan. So yeah, we got a couple more here, then just let the audience know we're going to get to open forum.
Okay. Once the preliminary issues are addressed, you can then begin to consider your workplace safety plan. First, I suggest use a measured and phased-in approach. Just don't throw open the doors and let everyone back into the office at once, obviously. Figure out who needs to be in the office based upon service needs and productivity, and consider whether employees can work remotely or if you're going to stagger work hours. Do a physical site inventory and address potential hazards, and consider social distancing protocols. That could be cleaning and disinfecting workstations and common areas, making sure employees wash their hands. Consider installing workstation barriers, reconfigure the workplace. Assess whether employees are going to need personal protective equipment. Some firms are giving them masks or telling them to wear masks in the office. Some are deciding it based upon hazard exposure in the office. And then, as I noted, check weekly for federal, state, and local guidelines and updates and amend your workplace safety plan accordingly. Make sure the plan is in writing and it's dated so folks know this is valid as of this date, and then change it accordingly, amend it as more updates occur. And then you can go to the last slide, Eric, please. And then we hear a lot about fit for work screening. How are you going to make sure that you're not allowing symptomatic or sick employees, come into the office and possibly infect the other employees. Note that the CDC has excellent guidelines on this specific issue. You need to leverage existing HR and emotional well-being and physical well-being programs, but at the same time develop a multi-layer approach for handling employees who exhibit symptoms to separate those employees from the larger workforce. Advise them to stay home and contact their doctor and quarantine, have them quarantined for 14 days or quarantine themselves for 14 days. For example, I suggest develop a defined approach for employers to follow when calling in sick. So folks who are calling sick or are exhibiting symptoms should be routed to a designated representative. This representative will use a questionnaire to confirm if an employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, and if they are, the employee can be advised of next steps, whether that's seeking medical care, whether that's going home, whether it's being quarantined for a number of days before you can return. Taking temperatures daily is another thing a lot of firms are doing. If temperatures are running high, they're being sent home and given other expectations, as I noted, for the employees, such as quarantining and things of that nature. Testing is another big area. Big question I hear is, how can I test? There are companies out there that will offer individual employee testing. Not cheap. It's about $100 per employee, but some firms are opting to contract with those testing companies in order to ensure workplace safety, looking at it as a cost but a necessary cost. And then contact tracing apps are also something that's been used. I know PwC has developed an app that'll monitor when somebody is in contact with a potentially infected individual. There's some serious privacy concerns with it. There's a surveillance versus safety issue. Unfortunately, you have a possibility of infecting an entire group of people. So some firms are picking the surveillance issue, the safety issue, or over the surveillance issues of the employee. But that's something to discuss with your legal counsel. And with any workplace safety program that you implement, be fair and reasonable. Make it above board and be transparent. Make sure that everybody is being treated fairly, and maintain confidentiality. If you're going to be taking down information, medical information of an individual, try to do it in the most discreet way. Don't advise other employees that a person's infected if you can avoid it. And keep that information in a repository where only limited people have access to it, because you don't want to end up with any liability exposure for divulging any personal identifiable or medical information. So, I know it's a daunting task.
I'm sorry.
No, I just say I know it's a daunting task, but it's something that a lot of firms can be able to work through if they just go to the right resources.
Well, Stan, thank you. I mean, and I think many of us, the AICPA and other organizations that we know, Aon, as he mentioned, many firms, you're all thinking about this. We're all entering this restart phase period, going back to work in some instances. Some of us have already returned. PCPS is going to be working on putting together some tools related to this. So we'll be continuing this discussion, and we just thought it was good to start it with this group. So thanks again, Stan, for that overview. What we want to do now, right before we go into open forum, is just to stand back and look at the many different relief options that are available to businesses. There's a lot outside of the PPP program, but what I want to ask Mark Peterson about is what we got highlighted here in red, and these additional relief programs, if you call it CARES 2.0, or if you call it, the Phase 4 bill. What do you mentioned, you talked a little bit about it earlier, Mark. How do you see this evolving?
Yeah, no, and I understand this is exhausting. We just have got through the PPP Flexibility Act, but there will be again discussion about what's next. And we do anticipate that there will be another major relief package. Mid-May, the House of Representatives passed a $3 trillion bill that was extremely broad, dealing with healthcare workers and, dealing with mortgages and all kinds of different things, including a lot of PPP flexibility, which was dealt with in the Flexibility Act that we just discussed. The way this will probably play out is right now the ball is in the Senate's court. The House is scheduled to be out. Anything can happen, but they're scheduled to be out until the end of June. What we've heard from the Senate is they plan on taking it up and start to consider what their package will look like. And the way I kind of see it probably playing out is that this drags through the summer and it ends up becoming a late July, potentially August package. Which is, the timing is going to be important because immediately after the president signs the PPP Flexibility Act, people are going to start talking about more changes that they need. And if they require statute, it needs a vehicle, which means it needs a bill. I think that the major discussion around that next piece of legislation and whether it happens or not is going to be, a battle between liability relief and getting more money into state and local relief. And so, I do believe they will come to terms with that. I do believe that there will be a package. I don't think it's going to be what the House passed. It will be very much a compromise package. But for certain things that are not as timely, like deductibility, PPP deductibility, which Mark mentioned, that would be the vehicle for that. And there may be other things as they arise coming out of reflecting on, the next round of FAQs and things like that. And then also, there's been so much focus on PPP. The slide here outlines some of the other initiatives. I think there will be an assessment by policymakers about, how is Main Street doing? What are the kinds of support they need? And there may be some reflection on, how should we adjust, create new programs, or potentially fund programs moving forward. So I think all of that's going to be discussed over the next few months. But where we really kind of see it coming to a head is probably late July or even leaking into August, Eric.
Yeah, well, Mark, thanks. And when you look at that slide, the PPP program, when you really step back, 500, even though we said it slowed down, $500 billion given out over a 2-month period, nothing like that's ever been done before. You compare it to 2008, this is much faster. But now the policymakers in Treasury and SBA will begin to focus on some of these other items, the Main Street lending, which we know has issues with both lenders and borrowers, but more to come as we get through this forgiveness phase. So Mark Koziol, this is some kind of summary thoughts on what firms need to think about right now, and then Lisa, after Mark covers this, we can take a couple of the questions, which I know the team has been doing a great job of answering real time. But Mark?
Great, Eric. If we go to the next slide, just on the summary thoughts.
Yes, it's there, Mark.
Oh, sorry, I can't see it. Supporting new applications until June 30th. So, there was a question. I know, Mark had mentioned this intent letter that was distributed. If that really gains hold, then June 30th is going to be the end of when this program can be lent. So getting your clients to, really take advantage of these next 3 weeks if they haven't already applied. Planning with your clients on business relief and restart. And that's really where our focus wanted to be. We have a lot of time on the relief. I know it's been stressful. Clients keep calling. Our job right now is to kind of manage that anxiety with the client a little bit and tell them that 24 weeks gives us a lot of time to do this absolutely right, to give us the best chance of success on the forgiveness. And then the forgiveness application, that's just it. No rush to filling it out. Let's talk our clients through their restart phase, tell them we'll get through this. We could talk about this as we go along the way, but let's get them back up and running so they can have as many employees working as possible to maximize that forgiveness on the back end. Eric?
Thanks, Mark. Well, Lisa, thank you for grabbing a few questions earlier. If there's maybe one other question or two that you want to, bring to us now, that'd be great. And I do want to thank your team that's been responding to so many of these questions. And we do tabulate all the questions that you give us, and that helps us drive the Resource Center. So with that, Lisa, what would you like to bring up?
I'll answer a question that we're getting quite frequently on the 8-week versus the 24-week covered period. It is at the election of the borrower if the borrower has an existing loan. So prior to the enactment of the Flexibility Act, it is an election that the borrower will make. We do not know how that election will be made, but I'm assuming that it will come through on the revised loan forgiveness application. So we still have a lot of questions to be answered, but please don't forget about just referencing the FAQs that we have on our site and the summary document that we posted in your presentation materials today about the Flexibility Act.
Thanks, Lisa.
And Lisa, the team, Eric, just on the questions, I've been watching the question feed, and we did beef up the number of folks that are sitting behind the scenes doing this. I want to thank them. We've answered a lot of questions. There's still, we get over 500 questions a week, which is a ton. We're answering a good number of those questions, and we will continue to work on getting these questions incorporated in our guidance.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And then we post our FAQs to this Resource Center. I think you all know how to find it, aicpa.org/SBA. That's where both the loan forgiveness calculator is there, but if you've got some clients that are going to apply now, you've got the actual loan amount calculator that you can leverage. So take advantage of those tools. We also have a broader COVID-19 tax resource center, which has a lot of great information. And here's a screenshot of some new matrix that we've put out, comparing the different business relief options. So that's a clickable link, and you can leverage that after today's webinar. Just wrap up here. What an incredible time that we're all living in. It's unprecedented in so many ways, but the role the firms are playing it's a defining moment for you, for your clients. We really appreciate this opportunity to connect with you weekly. So thank you for this hour. We will be having a town hall next Thursday at 3 p.m. And also next week is AICPA Engage. So we're going to actually do two special town halls. We're going to do one Tuesday at 3 p.m. That's going to be part of the Engage program. And then we'll also have another town hall on our next Thursday at 3. So thank you very much. Have a good week. This is a marathon, so stay with it. And thanks for your time again. That's all for now.